guys, you are on YouTube, and we are here from the Geek Girls Academy. I am Janet S. Brown, and I'm here today with my fabulous co-host, CJ and Aya. Hey, CJ.
Hello, everybody.
Yes, we're so glad to be here. Today's the more you know, which sometimes we talk about things that we come up with. Sometimes we're answering questions for other people, all sorts of things. But these are little things that you are probably going to encounter sooner or later in your publishing career, whether you're independently published or self-published. So we feel like these are helpful things. So today we are going to talk about the question of what does it mean when an editor says, I am not ready to be edited? Isn't it a developmental editor's job to take whatever I have put together and make it all shiny and new? So, CJ, why in the world would a developmental editor ever reject somebody's manuscript? Isn't that their business to developmentally edit it and fix all those things?
Um, it is their business to point out problems in the development that you can then go back and fix. But sometimes the book is so um, unstructurally just not sound in any way, shape, or form that I have had moments where I've had to switch from developmental editor to actual writing coach, where the entire scene, that all the chapters, step by step, had to be rewritten. And I had to go in and show them why. And I did that once. I made the mistake of doing that once, thinking that as a developmental editor, that was my job. And the amount of time I spent, the amount of headache involved, where I went from developmental editor to writing coach, it was not worth it. It had become a scenario where quite literally everything had to be fixed. And then I was teaching writing craft instead of the author already knowing writing craft and being able to implement, but having some, spots here and there that needed to be fixed. It was spots everywhere. It was actually having to teach things from the ground up. So you cannot, as an author, just write quickly, not plot anything, not incorporate what you're doing, and then just hand it over to a developmental editor and assume that it's now their job to polish it up and make it bestseller ready. That's not a developmental editor's job. You need to get it as good as you possibly can, implementing fundamentals, please, of writing craft, and then take it to a developmental editor where they can then say, okay, I found some problems. Here they are. Here are my suggestions for fixing them. It's not your developmental editor's job unless you pay them more to rewrite or fix things for you. I have been paid to rewrite scenarios and I've been willing to, but again, it's not their job to rewrite your book. It's their job to point out the problems, offer you solutions, and then you take it from there. And you are paying for expertise and the knowledge of storycraft. Because I've had some people come back and say, well, if all they're doing is analyzing the plot and all they're doing is picking out problems and they're not actually going in and changing words or doing anything, then what am I paying for? You're paying for their ability to actually figure out what is wrong with story, because story is hard and crafting stories are hard, and pinpointing why something isn't working, all of the various ways in which a story cannot work, that is expertise and experience in action. So you're paying for their experience and their expertise and their ability to help you dig deeper and fix things and point things out and make you think. So in some respects, they do go back to that writing coach, but it should never be at a level where they are in the trenches with you, to the extent that I was. Oh, dear Lord, because then you're just full blown writing coach trying to teach someone how to write a book. That I was not paid enough for that. No, no. Thoughts on that, Jenna?
Yeah, I agree. And I think where the line gets fuzzy and where people do come back and say, well, but so and so did help me, is some editors are also writing coaches. Some editors are also writers or ghostwriters. And so it comes down to, if you are paying them to do all of those things, you're going to find editors who are willing, but they are going to charge you a lot more, and they should. If they are not charging you a lot more, that's up to them. But most editors won't do that. Generally, what we're asking to be paid for is very, very certain things. And so if they come back and they say, this isn't ready yet, and here are the reasons why, if you want them to get into the nitty gritty, then you need to write back and say, okay, if it's not ready, is this something you can help me with? And what would be your rates for helping with rewrites and helping with, the functionally getting in there? And a lot of them will say, I don't do that. And they may send you to another writing coach or a ghostwriter or somebody who can help. But for a good part of them, it'll be, you really got to go back and do that. So if you can't afford to pay more for a writing coach or a ghostwriter, and yet your editor won't take it on because you're not ready, what can a young writer do, or an up and coming writer? We'll call them up and coming because writers can start at any age. Age is not a problem here. But what can an up and coming writer do to get past those craft issues, to figure out what they're doing wrong, so that they can get their manuscript to the point that the editor says, "Gimme, gimme, gimme." Ideas?
Yes, the first thing I would suggest is joining a writing critique group. You can meet in a physical location. You may have like writing chapters in your community. You could actually search for that. Or it may be online writing communities. And these are usually very small groups because you all need a chance to share parts of your story. And to all weigh in on everybody's, books and give pointers and constructive criticism. This was where I got my start, and this was what helped me understand fundamentals of writing and craft and plot and structure and character development and dialogue and pacing and tension and all the things. This was where I started to learn, and it was because I started with, a very rough approach of what I thought writing a story was, and then they very kindly looked at, anywhere from 3 to 4 pages of material every month, once a month. As I looked at theirs, not that I had a ton to contribute as a newbie, but I tried my best. And they were giving me pointers and helping me understand things because they were seasoned. So anytime you join a writing group, please make sure that you have a variety of people at different stages and not just everyone starting out new, because there's no way for you to help each other when it comes to critique if you actually don't have people who are seasoned within that group. Um, Another great thing to do is join writing conferences, whether online or actually physically going, because then you can take classes that will teach you. There are, of course, college courses you could take. I've never run into a college course that taught writing craft and story on a commercial level in a way where you could actually sell your books. Most of it is very classical literature based. That doesn't mean they're not out there, but just, research the types of creative writing classes you are taking to make sure that it's something that by the time you're done, you can actually write fiction that will sell and stories that will sell if selling is your goal. Um, and then aside from that, there are also just writing communities online without having to, go to a critique group or a conference. You can join writing communities and, ask questions, and you can do that on Facebook. You can do that in forums. Reddit is there. I've heard it's brutal, but you can. So there's all sorts of things that you can do in that respect. Jana, do you have other thoughts on how people can do that?
Absolutely. The other thing I would suggest is beta readers and sometimes even alpha readers. Now, the difference between the two, an alpha reader comes first. They are in there when you are doing your first passes, you're really, really early in the work. This can be somebody who helps you to get unstuck, that you brainstorm with. It can be somebody that you bring in either after you've finished your first rough draft or sometimes even chapter by chapter. My husband is my amazing alpha reader, at least for my fantasy stuff. He doesn't read my romance stuff. He pats me on the head and tells me that's very nice. But he likes to read the fantasy. And with that, I send it to him with each chapter. And then he'll write back and he'll say, okay, I really loved this. I got thrown by this. Maybe you want to tweak that. So he's right there in the weeds with me, where he's not coming up with the story, but he's my very first reader. And because he loves and is so seeped in the genre, he can sometimes identify things that I'm doing wrong. He's also a clean pair of eyes so that he notices things like, you know, you had her get off of the horse in the first part of this chapter, and 3 paragraphs later, she's back on the horse. When did that happen? Because sometimes those continuity details, I can say those words, are really hard to keep track of when you're just in the flow of the thing. So having that other person to look at it and say, well, you either got to put her back on the horse or don't have her get off the horse in the first place, that can really help. So that's an alpha. They're really in the weeds with you. Beta reader is somebody who comes along generally after you've done your first revision as an author. So usually we suggest you write your rough draft, and rough drafts just have to exist. The more practice you have, the cleaner your rough drafts will be. And you can do things like what Dean Wesley Smith calls cycling, where he goes back over what he wrote the day before, does editing and cleanup on that, and then that leads right into the next day's writing. We don't necessarily tell up and coming authors to do that because sometimes the whole point of cycling is that you can go back and then you can go forward. Well, very often, especially if you have any perfectionist tendencies, instead of going back and going forward, you go back and 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 back, and you rework the same chapter until it's dead, and then it no longer has your voice and it's no longer fun, and now you're tired and you don't want to work on it anymore. So that's why we often say a rough draft just has to exist. You just got to barf it out, whatever that is for you. So often it's rough draft, and then as the author, take a day away from it, take a few weeks away from it if you need to, so that you can look at it with clean eyes. Then you go back through and you do your revision and look for all those continuity things and story things. And then you would give it to a beta reader who would then go through and give you feedback. And this is generally not feedback on things like, I think you need a comma here. We don't do that line and detailed editing at that point, because if they identify something that's problematic and you rip out 17 pages, you don't want to have had them spend all the time finding the typos on those 17 pages that end up not existing anymore. The beta is really about that gut instinct. Did the story work? Does the character arc work? Are you getting the emotional beats? Are there things that are confusing? Is there bad continuity? And so those beta readers can help you identify those things. And once you've cleaned it up after the beta reader, the vast majority of the time, you will be, and your critique group can also be your beta readers. Um, then you're usually to a point that a developmental editor can look at it. And as you get more and more experience, if you're really, really good and you've got a great beta reader critique group, you may not even need the developmental editor once you're several books down the line, and be able to have a copy that is so clean, it's ready to go right into copy and line edits. So that's some of the benefits there. But you really need to do it because those dev editors, for them to do their job to the very, very best of their ability, they kind of need the water to be clean. So it's one of those things. If you've got a lot of stuff that is very basic things that you and your betas should be catching, that your dev editor has to wade through in order to get to the storylines, the characters, all that kind of thing, they're going to miss things. They're not going to be able to do their very best work. They're going to tell you, I'm being thrown out of the story. And so your reader's going to be thrown out of the story too. And that's, where they would go after 3 pages, I would draw a line and stop reading because it's so confusing. And confuse people or bore them, they're done. Okay, so that's really why an editor is going to come back to you and say, you're not ready yet. These are the hardest emails we have to write. Back me up on that one, CJ.
Yes, they are, because
Yeah.
you feel bad and you want to help, but the amount of help is not something we think you will pay us for.
Ooh,
So, and we find over and over again when we lay out everything we would have to do to really help you and we give you a price point, the answer is probably not. And I'll see you once I have this in a better state, this manuscript in a
yeah,
much better state and ready for developmental editing. So,
yeah.
yeah.
And very often editors who say, oh yeah, I'll take on whatever and just charge you more, they may or may not be doing you any favors. If you're going to
Mm,
take somebody on to do all of that, please talk to their other clients and make sure that they're worth what you're going to pay.
yeah.
Because I've seen that too often, that an unready manuscript hit an editor who said, I can fix all of this. They ended up doing a light copy edit and turning it back. And then the manuscript went out with the author thinking that they was ready to go, and it got absolutely roasted online. So, always check your editor's credentials, make sure that they can do the work that they say they can, but especially if you're coming with a manuscript where you feel like it may not have been workshopped very much, just be careful there. Know that your editors are there to help you, or really, really should be, and not just to keep increasing the price for something that they may or may not be able to do for you. So there you go, guys. Sometimes you're ready and sometimes you're not. When you are ready, you can also come over and use our developmental editors at Geek Girls Academy. Uh, we're happy to talk to you about that. But yeah, keep it in mind, nobody's rejecting you. They're rejecting the manuscript, okay? Also, you have to keep that in mind so it doesn't feel personal. It always will feel personal, but it's not. It's about looking at the manuscript, not about who you are. All right, guys, get those red pens out and get writing. We'll see you later on another The More You Need to Know. Bye-bye.
Bye.